So you have different categories of feelings. So when you're young, you go out there and you want to experiment with things. It's organic, it's what every kid wants to do. So most of the emotions or the feelings that you have come through your physical body and its interaction with the physical world. There comes a point where you're looking for, let's say, another set of emotions, and let's just say it comes from reading books, it comes from listening to music, it comes from having conversations. Now you pick and choose where you want your physical body to be. In order, for example, to buy a good book, you need to go to Barnes and Nobles. To have good conversations, well, you need to call specific types of people. And so you become very deliberate as to where you want to place your body so you can get those sets of desired emotions. It's no longer jumping in the pool, for example. It's no longer going to a burger shop with your friends. There comes a point, let's just say, where you want to have specific emotions that are related to your reflective life. Maybe you want to read the Bible, maybe you want to read Plato. Now you place your body in even a smaller circle with only a few people that can actually grasp those particular emotions. They can understand and desire to experience those emotions. So remember, as you kind of just move up the ladder, your desire for experiences that create emotions become much more specific. The anatomy of emotions, they're all the same. How they're generated, what they make you feel, but their quality is different. And I suppose you could say, as you go up the ladder, their value begin to change. There comes a point where you don't really care so much for the emotions that are generated by having your physical body interact with the physical world. There comes a point where you no longer desire to just watch any movie, or just have any conversation, or just read any book. Let's say you run into a Socrates. Now, Socrates may create the same emotion, for example, as when you go to the ocean and you look at the water and you feel insignificant, you feel small, and maybe you'll put you in a somewhat of a depressive mood. Or maybe you find some calm and comfort by standing by this pool of water. Socrates does the same thing to you. The only problem is that the ocean you can see the grandness of the ocean, you can see the waves, you can see the whales or the dolphins. There is this immensity to the ocean that makes you feel a certain way. Then you look at Socrates. He hasn't spoken to you, or maybe he has, a few words. You can't describe it. All you know is that you have these feelings when you look at him, or when you hear him talk, when he looks at you. And you can't say these are physical. experiences. You can't say these are intellectual experiences. You can't even say these are psychological experiences. For some strange reason, Socrates, there's just something about his presence that goes inside you and makes your body react a certain way, your emotions react a certain way. You want to understand, but you can't. It's not like you can sit there and read a book from beginning to end to figure out how the story began or ended. You find yourself in this, pool of emotions that you can't describe, you can't explain, and you can't really understand. It's a bundle of confusion. You can get over your curiosity when you stand by a poolside. You just jump into water. Your physical body becomes, after a while, it gets adjusted to the temperature of the water and you begin to swim. You can nourish an emotion or get rid of an emotion. Let's say you're just hungry and you just want a burger or a pizza. You can fulfill those appetites relatively quickly. So when you talk about emotions and desires, it really depends on what kind of emotions you're talking about. In this movie, it's a 6.5 hour movie, almost 7 hours, Jesus of Nazareth. And you don't have to watch the movie for religious reasons. It's just, an interesting movie, and all movies have something interesting to kind of tell you and teach you. Where someone in the movie, it's at the beginning of the scene where Jesus is an adult now. This kid, his name is John, son of Zebedee, goes to him and says, the laws were not meant to be inscribed in stone, but in our hearts. And Jesus looks at him and says, follow me. And he says, okay. And it makes no sense. And the point is, you're dealing with a mode of inspiration and a category of emotions and feelings that are non-rational. You don't know where they came from. You don't know why they make you do some of the things that you do. And I guess the point I'm trying to make, I can't really answer the question unless I know which category of emotions you're talking about. We have no choice but to feel. It happens at the very moment of your birth. You come out and you cry. And people have different ideas, theories as to why infants cry. I don't know. All I know is that newborns just cry. For what reason, I don't really know. They just feel something. And that feeling continues for the rest of our life. We are pushed around by life all the time. Sometimes you're pushed because you don't have a shelter. Sometimes you're pushed to cry or have feelings because you have shelter. You just don't have food in the shelter. Sometimes you have feelings and you cry because, you have food, you have shelter, you just don't have a companion. Sometimes you cry and you have certain feelings, not because you don't have food, not because you don't have shelter, because you have all of them. You just feel alone. And you don't feel alone because you have no one in your life. You feel alone because you have a lot of people in your life, but for some strange reason, you have this feeling as if no one understands you, including yourself. And you look back at your life and you realize that you have been this animal that feels and has been feeling from day one. But the feelings are related, connected to different things, depending where you are, who you're with, what stage of life, you occupy. You know, when you find something attractive out there, that attraction generates feelings. It's organic. You have no hand in it. You know, the stage where your physical body comes into play to take physical action, that's a different story. But when your eyes see something and it just organically finds it attractive, you have feelings about it. When your ears hears a tone of voice or music that it finds pleasant, it moves you, inspires you, you have feelings. When you touch something that is silky, is soft, the point is anything that is attractive to your senses, you have no choice but to be all of a sudden the cradle of feelings. So from the very moment of your birth, you have no choice but to be in the pursuit, sometimes organically, sometimes not so organically, in the things that are attractive to you. And that attraction creates feelings. Those feelings create pleasure. And whatever gives you pleasure, you want more of it, which means that you spend more time with it. You interact with it more. And as you interact with it more, you have no choice. That interaction lives in time. Time creates stories. You know, imagine, for example, that someone asks you, why do you go to this place? Why do you go to his or her house? And you say, well, it feels like home. Don't you have a home of your own? Yeah, but what kind of a home are you talking about? Well, I go there because that place is a home to my body, but it's really not a home to my emotions. It's not a home to my intellect. And if there is a soul, it's certainly it's not a home for my soul. Okay? So you go to this other place for what? It's not a place I go to sleep physically. It's a place where my emotions and my intellect and my soul find comfort. Now, depending on where exactly you are in life, maybe sometimes you want emotional, intellectual, maybe even spiritual home, maybe once a week, only for 10 minutes. Okay? It means that you have more of a relationship and therefore more of an attachment to the home that allows your physical body to be comfortable. And while you're in your physical home, but emotionally you're absent, intellectually you don't really reflect that much, and your soul is dead. Once in a while you hear something when you say, it's okay. Okay. So remember, whatever you're attracted to gives you pleasure. Whatever gives you pleasure, you want more of it. And whenever you want more of something, you have to spend time. When you spend time, you make sacrifices with the thing that gives you pleasure. In making sacrifices and in spending time, you create stories. In creating stories, you create a certain identity that I like to see myself thinking this way, feeling this way, and going home with this particular psychological mood. That identity creates an attachment. There's a past to it, there is a future to it, and while you're there, there's a present to it. So we have no choice but to be attached. We become attached to events that give us pleasure. We become attached to events that give us pain. I've said all of this for the following reason. That suffering comes in Buddhism because of attachment. And it's best not to be attached. Well, that may be so. But I think that particular set of instructions are only meant for those who are very, very advanced in thinking, feeling, and being. They're not meant for the common masses. You are supposed to be attached, and you're supposed to go through the suffering caused by attachments. You should be sad and you should be miserable when you can't pay next month's rent. That's who and what you are. That's where your life is. You should be upset when you and your companion have a disagreement about something. You shouldn't all of a sudden put your head in, a hole in the ground and read the Dhammapada because the Buddha said being angry is bad. It's best to be a stoic. That's not for us. I mean, it's a great philosophy. And it's a good philosophy to kind of distract yourself from where you are in life, You and I have no choice but to be attached because of maybe the stage of life we occupy. It's difficult to tell a 30-year-old who just got his PhD or his master's from Columbia, who just went to an interview for a full-time position, teaching position, and did a horrible job, and he comes out being sad, verge of crying. Well, it would be foolish to say, oh, listen, you went to school and did religious studies. Haven't you heard that thou shalt not store your treasures down here? Haven't you heard that with attachment comes suffering? Practice what you preach. The truth is, well, you're not being a Buddhist when you go to an interview. You want a job. You have made all the sacrifice to get a PhD. You want an outcome that gives you pleasure. You're not a Buddhist. You have an idea of Buddhism in your head. Now, I guess the next set of perhaps questions would be, well, to what things should one be attached? Well, if you want to become attached to anything again, first, you have to be attracted to it. Then you have to spend time with it. Enough to make stories. Enough for those stories have the proper depth to give you an identity that I like my image when I go to this place 4 times a week. It doesn't mean I don't like the other images, but I like this particular image more than others. And now there's a hierarchy of value, of identities. I'm a wife, I'm a husband, okay? I'm a waitress, but I really like myself when I teach. You're playing all these roles as well as the role of being a teacher. But for some strange reason, being a wife is $5, being a waitress is $2, being a teacher is $25. You like feeling the worth of being $25. Now, what happens is this. When you say, okay, I'm going to quit my waitressing job and be a wife and a teacher, it means that this time that you save from no longer being a waitress, you either give it to being a wife or you spend that time on being a teacher. And you say, okay, well, I'm a wife. I love my husband or my wife or my kids, whatever the case may be. It's not bad. It's worth $5. That's good. Do I want it to be 6? Yeah. I'm also an instructor, as you are. I want to go in the classroom and teach, and I want more classes, and I want to read more, and I want to think more, and I want to feel more, and I want to reflect more, and I want to write more, and I want to express things more. Say, I like being a wife. I like being a mother. I really, really like reading. and writing and thinking and expressing the things I feel and think. Now, the time that you no longer give to waitressing, you give it to this area, which means that all of a sudden the instructor that you are, instead of spending 5 hours a week, now you spend 10 hours a week. Your wife role, it's still $5. Your role as an instructor, as identity, as an instructor, it becomes $100. Now what happens, you're going to take this role into your family life. And you want to shape your family life around the role that has more value. Now there's going to be a great amount of conflict. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But again, the point I'm trying to make in regards to feelings and emotions is you find yourself at different stages. And all these different stages create a different set of feelings and emotions, i.e. different values. There is this other part. Sometimes you do want to do some things that will generate feelings that are like gold, but the sacrifices that they demand and the burdens that they create and the sorrows, the pain that they generate and the intensity that they create is far too much. That you get to a place where you just feel as if you're far too exhausted to pursue the thing that you know gives you value. It's too much. So you retract, and you go to the feelings that have always created some conflict, some negative reflection. But if you stay with these, the $5 feelings, eventually the $100 feelings will slowly disappear. Once in a while, they'll show their face. When you read, I think it's the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3 or chapter 5, they're like on this boat. Now, Jesus has disciples because he has made them feel something. They don't even know what it is, but they're willing to follow him. And that in itself is strange because you are following a certain set of feelings that you don't really understand. And it's not like you're a 10-year-old kid. You have all these disciples who are married with kids, who have parents who are old, they need to be taken care of. But the disciples don't care, really. So despite coming from a background where you take care of your family, you take care of your parents, and there are great set of feelings inside, religious feelings, social feelings, but there is this Jesus that creates, or whomever, creates a set of feelings inside these 3, 4, 5, 10 disciples that they say, you know what? I love my father, but for some strange reason, I don't love him as much. And you follow the strange man. They're on the boat and they've seen Jesus do all sorts of crazy things. Walk on water, heal the sick, multiply fish and bread and all that. The waters are rough and the winds are powerful. And all of a sudden the disciples are really, really shaken and they're afraid. It doesn't take very much for us to forget. And what you have in this, tiny little kind of story is that despite everything that this man has done, all the transformative qualities that live inside him and his power to change people instantaneously, all of a sudden you have something from far away, a storm. Storm makes these people all of a sudden have physical feelings now. My life, death, pain, father, mother. Where is he taking us? What's happening to us? And what you have, if you were to kind of just look at this, the first 5-6 chapters as how a single day unfolds. Your wife says, can you get some milk? You say yes. Your dad says, can you stop by CVS and get me some medicine? You say yes. You have respect and feelings for your family, for your parents. All of a sudden you run into this person. He inspires these feelings you don't really understand. You no longer feel for your father. You no longer feel for your wife and the kids. You're just going to pursue this. Your feelings become more intense as he does magic tricks. And now you're even more confused. And your faith in him grows, and your desire for him grows. And then as you're sitting on the boat or standing on the boat, all of a sudden the storm hits. And now doubt enters, fear enters. You go back to being the person who left the house in the morning. And then 10 minutes later, as you're fearful and doubtful of what's going to be happening to you, and you're no longer having these spiritual feelings, but you're having very human feelings about you, Jesus looks at you and says, you people have so little faith. I have done all these things, Don't you think I have the power to quiet the storms and the waters? And he does. And all of a sudden, their faith is restored. And if you look at the story, you realize you have all these different sets of feelings coming at different times, creating different identities, different hopes, different fears, different doubts. And it never ended for any of them, They kind of just yo-yoed between being human, being a student, having faith, having doubt, being human, And I think if you were to, again, forgive me for rambling on because this is, I don't know if it has anything to do with your question, but if you put the life of Jesus within the context of Rumi's poem, that سینه خواهم شرح شرح از فراق تا بگویم شرح درد اشتیاق, that you have a man who becomes wise. How he becomes wise, who knows? How he finds union, who knows? How does he find the Joseph within? Because he couldn't find happiness after the age 12. He couldn't find it in Judaism. He couldn't find it in his family, in his town, in his friendships. He left for 18 years. Somewhere in those 18 years, he found what he was looking for. But in those 18 years, what you have is a man who's broken, who's lonely, who's sad, who's like a moth looking for a flame. He finds it. He goes inside the flame. He becomes one with the flame. You see me, you see the Father, for example, as he says in the Gospel of John. So what you have is a man who's completely broken. He comes back to Nazareth. What he's looking for is someone who's equally broken, so that a man who's broken can speak to another man who's equally broken, but he doesn't find any of them, so he gets misunderstood all the time. And so, again, depending on the quality of your feelings and the stage where those feelings come from, make sure that you're not deceived when you express your feelings to a friend of yours just because they nod their head. Make sure that they're broken in the same way, because that brokenness creates its own set of feelings. And for you to be understood, the person listening to you must have been broken in a similar way, either in the present or in the past, but have not forgotten the past. Only in that way can the two of you break bread emotionally. You have no choice but to be attached. The question is to what? You know, the story of Plato and Socrates is really, it's a nice story in regards to attachments. Plato is attached to becoming a lawyer. He's attached to becoming a politician because of his father, for the most part. A chance encounter, or maybe fated. His attachment to politics, his attachment to becoming a lawyer, becoming rich and famous, changes. He becomes attached to Socrates. Socrates creates feelings that are linked to philosophy, not the academic philosophy. Socrates creates love inside Plato and protects that love. And out of love, after long, many years, wisdom is given to Plato. You can't be wise and then love. First you love, then you suffer the confusion. You have to go through the separation, the anxiety. And then if you can survive it, if you're lucky, then this other part of philosophy comes to you, Sophia.